Okay, so now we're going to take a look at some of the information about trigonometric graphs. So first, let's just watch this for a second and see what's happening. If we notice, the second that it hits at 0, it's going to start at 0, 0. So like, boom. And then it goes and it goes. So it keeps going around a circle. Awesome. So now let's watch. And it ends at 2 pi. Okay, watch the circle start, ends the circle. Start, ends the circle. Start, ends the circle. And that's start, ends. So it's starting at 0, 0, ending at 2 pi. Watch one more time now at the 0, 0. Ready? Start, ends. That was one full cycle around the circle, okay? So now this is going over exactly what I just did when you watched the video of me doing it. If you want to pause this and take notes, go for it. Okay. So here's the basic information that you're going to need to know. The first thing you're going to need to know is this equation, okay? This equation is the same equation for sine and cosine. So here are all the important parts. The first important part is the amplitude. Amplitude is like how loud it is, and that's how high the graph goes. So if you see here, the amplitude goes from the middle of the graph to the top of the graph, or from the middle of the graph down to the bottom of the graph. It's the same amplitude going up and down. Okay, the B is the frequency. So that's how many cycles it can take between 0 and 2 pi. The period, and that's kind of like what we were looking at, those like spaced out ones, and then the really scrunched together, right? And so the higher pitched it is, the closer together it is. It's going to be kind of like woo. And then if that's going to be a high frequency, and if it's a low frequency, it's like woo. Okay, let me erase that so we don't have too much going on here. This is a really important formula, and that's the formula for period. Okay, and that's right here. So period equals 2 pi over b, and the b is this number right here. So to find the period, which is like one full cycle, so here's an example. Starting here, one full cycle like that. Okay, another example. I'm going to just erase that. I'm going to highlight that puppy. One full cycle. There we go. That's a little bit better. Okay. So, sorry, I erased that by accident. Okay. Phase shift means that if the entire graph is shifted left or right. We're not going to worry about that one right now. The vertical shift does matter. So that's going to be if the whole graph gets moved up or moved down. That's going to be the midline. And the midline is this line right here. So the midline is the line that goes through the middle of the graph, and it hits at all those 0 points. Okay, that's the midline. And then there's the maximums and the minimums. We can even label that right there. This is a max, and this is a minimum, like a relative max and a relative minima. Okay, the period is one full cycle. So you'll see here, this right here is the period, because this is how long it takes to do from the beginning right here to the end right here, one full cycle, which is what I highlighted. Okay, so that's a period. A period is one full cycle. Okay, so now we're going to write down some of that vocab. The amplitude, okay, is half the distance between the maximum and minimum values. Amplitude is always given as a positive number. That's why we see it in the absolute value. The period of a function is the x interval, so that's just like how far across. You can see, oops, right there. It takes for it to do one full cycle. So a full cycle is like what we graphed when I showed you on the board. The period formula is period equals 2 pi over b. Okay. And again, pause it at any point to take notes. The midline of a function is the horizontal line that's equidistant to the max and min, meaning it's a line that goes through the middle of the graph. Here the midline is at y equals 5, okay, because you'll see here it crosses at 5 on the y-axis. Okay. And that's it for that. Okay, an important point. If the a value is negative, so that's the a value right here. If it is negative, the graph goes down instead of going up at the beginning. So it still starts at the same place, but instead of going up first, it goes down first. Here, it starts, instead of starting up here, it's actually going to start down here because it's negative. So that's a negative sine or negative cosine. It looks just like sine and cosine, it's just flipped down. so now we're going to practice together. So first what we're going to do is find the midline, the amplitude, and the period from a graph. Okay, we can do this. So the midline goes through the middle of the graph. So you can kind of look from the top up here is at 3. The bottom down here is at -3. So the middle is going to be right here. And that means that our midline is y equals 0. Okay, that's nice and easy one. The amplitude. So amplitude is the distance between the midline and the highest point. So that's from 0 to 3. That's 3 spaces up. And you can just count 1, 2, 3. So the amplitude is 3. A equals 3. The period. So the period is 1 full cycle, okay? That's the highlighted part in yellow. And if we look here, okay, it looks like, oh, I think the markings got off a little bit. But it looks like this is pi right here. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So that means that, okay, if this is 2 pi right here, oops, this is 2 pi right here, this is, no, half of that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, this is pi right here. I don't know why it got moved over so far. So let me erase this. Oh, I'll just crop that out. So this is 2 pi right here. Okay. This is pi right here. And so 1 full cycle, we can even do it in a different color. Okay, ends at pi. So the period is pi. Okay, because that's where 1 full cycle ends. All right, let's do another one. Example 2. So the midline. Okay, we're going to go to the middle of the graph. So the highest point is at 4. The lowest point is at -2. So we got to find where the middle of that would be. And those are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces apart. So that means it's 3 from either way, right? So 1, 2, 3, okay, right there. Or you can go 1, 2, 3 from the bottom. So if we notice that's at 1, so the midline is at y equals 1. That's this again. This is the midline. Okay. Amplitude goes from the midline to the highest point. That's 3 spaces, so the amplitude is 3. And now for the period. And if we look at this one is a cosine because it's not starting at the midline, it's starting at the amplitude right here on the y-axis. Okay. So we look at 1 full cycle, and a full cycle ends where it started. So I started at the top, I end at the top, and I look to see where that's at, and that's at pi. So again, our period is at pi. Okay. Here is an example to do it with an equation. The midline is going to be in the back. So if there's anything being added here, that would be the midline. So since there's nothing, that means it's at 0. The amplitude is right here. So the amplitude would be 3. For the period, we have to find what b is. So b equals 2, because it's the number in front of x. And so the period equals 2 pi over b. And if we simplify this, the period equals pi. Okay, awesome job. Let's do the same thing now for some of these examples. So we're going to find the amplitude and the period for each one. So the amplitude here, it's right here, is going to be 5. That means that from the middle of the graph, it goes up 5 and down 5. The period is 2 pi over b, which is 2. And then we simplify, and that equals pi. Let's do the next one. Okay, the amplitude, that's the number right here. So if there's no number, put a 1 in, the amplitude's 1. The period is 2 pi over b, that's this guy. And I can't simplify that, so the period is 2 pi over 5. Let's go to the next one. The amplitude is 3. That's the number in front, positive 3. The period is 2 pi over b, and b is the number in front of the x. If I simplify that, it's equal to 2. Lastly, the amplitude is 7. The period is 2 pi over b, which is 1/2. Remember, when you divide by a fraction, you have to flip it. Multiply, and then you flip it. So that equals 4 pi. That's going to be the period. If you want to figure this one out, you think, what would be the max value? Well, I start by thinking, where's the midline? Midline's at 4. So if you picture the graph, 1, 2, 3, 4, there would be a line going across right here. Then from there, since this is sine, we would start right here and make our first point. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And we would go up 3 spaces. So from here we go up 1, 2, 3, and that's where our next point would be. Then the next one's back at 0, and then we'd go down 3. 1, 2, 3, and make our point there, and then here we're back at 0. And so the maximum right here would be 7. Is there a quicker way we could have found that? There is. You can take the D plus the A, so that's the midline or vertical shift, plus the amplitude, and find the max, and then you could take the midline and subtract the amplitude to find the minimum. Okay, we are going to pause there, and that's it for right now.